Hello, East Mode debaters. My name is Gabe D'Antonio. I debated with Ladue High School for 4 years, and today I'm going to talk about creating a 1AC. This is really important for all of you 2As out there, so hopefully this video helps you to create your next 1AC. I'm going to go through two approaches that I think work really well for making an affirmative case. First, there's the top-down approach. So top-down 1AC construction generally means we're choosing a topic first and filling in the blanks afterwards. So what does that mean? It means if I'm on a criminal justice topic and I'm really excited about drug decriminalization or mandatory minimums, I can pick that topic first and I can use a top-down method to create a 1AC afterwards. This is really useful, one, for novices, because you have novice case areas, there's relatively limited options. You can look at those, see what you're most excited about, and then create a 1AC based off this method. Or this is really nice if there's a particular issue on the topic that you're passionate about, you know that you want to debate about it, and you just need to create a 1AC that fits with that. So the first step is to find that topic. You need something that you're excited about running. If that doesn't jump out to you, do a little bit of research, read about the topic, read the novice case areas, the camp apps. You can even check out my video on researching a new topic for help on figuring out this type of thing. But if there isn't a topic that you're excited about debating, perhaps this is not the best method for creating a 1AC. Next, you need to search for a solvency advocate. A solvency advocate is the linchpin of a good 1AC. Every 1AC needs a solvency advocate. That's generally an expert writing an article or a policy proposal about your subject, calling for a specific action with a specific actor. So an example of that could be in a mandatory minimum AF, you could find a legal scholar saying that the Supreme Court should rule against the constitutionality of mandatory minimums on 8th Amendment grounds. Or you could write about a think tank that's arguing that Congress should pass a bill that eliminates mandatory minimums. These are examples of advocates with credentials, right? A legal scholar or a think tank. They're asking for a specific action, a ruling against the constitutionality of mandatory minimums, or passing a bill that eliminates mandatory minimums. And they have an actor, right? The first one's talking about the Supreme Court, and the second one's talking about Congress. This is really important. One, to make sure that your solvency works, you have a good evidentiary basis for your plan. It lets you write your plan text. So, if I'm like, okay, I'm going to write something about mandatory minimums, but what should I write in my plan text? Well, once I have this legal scholar, I can sort of copy their terminology, right? I can say the Supreme Court should rule using 8th Amendment grounds against the constitutionality of mandatory minimums or something like that. Or I could say the United States federal government should pass a bill that eliminates mandatory minimums, something like that. And it can be more specific or less specific. But the important thing is it matches your solvency advocate. It'll also be important for answering counterplans later. Something like an actor counterplan isn't nearly as effective if your solvency advocate has specific reasons for why the Supreme Court, rather than say Congress or the executive, should deal with the problem. Step 3, choose your advantages. So I recommend either looking for impacts or links first. Specific impacts are more important if you're going for a big stick strategy, whereas good links are more important if you're going for more of a soft left affirmative. You can check out other videos about big stick AFs and soft left AFs later if you're interested. Once you have a good link or an impact, you can fill in the rest of the advantage from there. For example, if I'm writing about mandatory minimums, maybe I'll find an article that says mandatory minimums are terrible. If we get rid of them, we can reduce mass incarceration. So I cut that and I make that my link evidence. And then I can fill the rest in, right? I'm like, okay, what do I need to say is happening right now? I need to say mandatory minimums are currently causing mass incarceration. Removing them fixes the problem. And then I can say mass incarceration is bad. And boom, I have an entire advantage. Or maybe I pick something like an impact, right? I want to write about, climate change. And then I have my nice climate change impact. And then I look for how my link can get there, find the uniqueness, et cetera, et cetera. Quick note, check that out at the bottom. Check if your solvency advocate wrote any other articles, and also check if they cited any other articles. Oftentimes, the best AFs use a similar family of links and solvency advocates, because if your link evidence is talking about exactly what your solvency advocate is talking about, that's going to make your affirmative a better affirmative. Finally, fill in the rest of your case. Normally, that'll just mean inherency. That's not too big of a deal. You can check out our stock issues lecture if you have any questions on that, but it's generally one card and it's not going to come up too much. You can add to solvency if you think that's important, trying to preempt a counter plan or just improve it if there's some particular weakness. You can add framing if that's something you're interested in, but generally this step 4 is not going to be too much. It's normally just inherency, because then you've got inherency, solvency, a couple of advantages, and boom, you're ready to take this out for a spin. Next, a bottom-up 1AC construction. This is a little bit more involved. I don't generally recommend this for your first year or even necessarily your second year. You should get some experience debating on the topics, thinking about policy in abstract terms before you try to build a bottom-up path. But it can be really important if you're trying to do well at some of the district tournaments, state tournaments, or national tournaments to have a 1AC where you've thought a lot of these questions through. So what is bottom-up 1AC construction? It starts from strategic realities and then builds up. So what is that going to entail? First, we need to analyze the topic. So I generally like to do this by writing out all of the negative arguments on the topic and then breaking them into categories, ranking their quality, and determining which type of affirmatives each of those negative arguments are good against. So let's try to break this down a little bit. If you look at my example down there, we see that the arms sales topic had some really good disadvantages like fill-in and alliance. They had a great counterplan called the conditions counterplan. And they're particularly good against affirmatives that try to use arms sales to influence America's allies' policies. So if we took step 1, we would write out, okay, fill-in disad, alliance disad, conditions counterplan. And then we could break them into categories. And there are a few ways that you can break them into categories. Generally, I like to do it off what they're linking from. So let's try to talk about this in the arms sales specific topic. There are a variety of disadvantages that link off of the signal that is sent from a reduction in arms sales, right? For example, a alliance disad says that sending a signal to the country that you are no longer giving them arms sales hurts your alliance with them. Similarly, an emboldenment disad says that ending arms sales sends a signal to another country that you will not support the country you were selling arms sales to, which leads them to be more aggressive. Those are similar in that they both rely on a signal. This is different from, say, an argument where the link relies on weapons themselves. If you think of something like maybe Saudi Arabia is unable to maintain the war in Yemen without United States supplies. That's specific to the weapons rather than to the signal. And disads that fit in that could be something like the defense industrial base, which argues that because weapons themselves are not being sold, that's losing money and industrial capability. Or a fill-in disad, which talks about another country giving those same weapons and preventing that change from even actually happening. So the reason it's important to break these up is because then you can figure out what types of affirmatives are weak against which types of negative arguments. So an affirmative that relies heavily on sending a signal to Saudi Arabia is going to be weak to an alliance disad. A affirmative that relies heavily on arguing that Saudi Arabia cannot maintain the war in Yemen without our weapons is going to be really weak to a fill-in disad. Once you understand that, you can start to brainstorm a list of conditions. You look at big negative positions and the affirmatives they're good against, and you write a list of conditions that would prevent negative positions from being good against an affirmative. For example, a fill-in disad was good against apps that tried to control other countries using arms sales. A condition that could prevent the fill-in disad from being good would be a country being isolated from other world powers. So let's break this down using an example from Ari and William, who read an affirmative about ending arms sales to the European Union. So they were able to look at the negative arguments on this topic, something like a fill-in disad, which normally says that either Russia or China is going to give those weapons instead. And they could say that in the European context, we realize that that disad is going to be weak because specifically they had a whole load of reasons, but essentially Europe and the European Union is not going to look to China and Russia for those weapons when they can produce them themselves, or an alliance disad, right? It's hard to argue that you're going to lose a vulnerable alliance with the EU when the United States and the EU have such a close relationship. So they were able to look at all the good disads on the topic and then build an affirmative that was able to avoid those disads successfully by meeting a number of conditions. And that is the third step. You need to find an advocacy that fulfills as many of those conditions as possible. There's not really a step-by-step. You just need to read and think and research and figure out, okay, what is an advocacy that has real advantages that is going to be able to avoid sort of the most worrisome disads. Now, you're not going to be able to find something that avoids literally every possible negative argument, nor do you really want to. That can be pretty boring. But if you can successfully make it so that, okay, only the fill-in disad is good against this app, nothing else is good against it, and you can just prepare and practice, and you'll know how to answer the fill-in disad, and nothing else is going to get run nearly as often. This can be a huge strategic benefit because you sort of have that knowledge, and it's going to give you a lot of leverage over negative teams that aren't necessarily prepared to go against an affirmative that's so well positioned against the most popular negative arguments. Step 4, now you've switched back to top down. You now know what your topic is about. So now you construct a 1AC, finding solvency advocate, then advantages, then filling everything else out, similar to if it were a top down affirmative. Hope this was helpful. I hope your 1ACs keep getting better and better. Thank you.